6:30, it's time to start.
Our kids are flying, my older daughter and son-in-law are flying across the Atlantic as we speak.
We'll bring them.
Hopefully we can get them to come next
Where do they live?
Berlin.
Oh, wow.
The other daughter's coming from Palms.
You're all fancy with the table, Donna. Well, yeah, last week it was easier to do. Oh, I think so, because it's easier to type.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm gonna take notes. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
We hear the principals and look through these again.
Pablo to pass the key, so this is the next week.
Yeah, good. Pablo's
Thank
nice.
you. Principals. Principals.
Thank you.
So we're all sent to the principal.
Yes. Put this here, please.
Oh, thanks. Good.
Here, I'll put that.
Oh, thank
Here
you.
is the document.
Thank you.
Document.
Thank you.
Here's the document.
How about should I just go, like, follow the next, just like a line and or go to part?
No, a new one.
A new one, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we-
Subject one for each one. How many synagogues are participating in this?
I think it's less than, yes, this is just, if you want it side by side. I don't know exactly, I'm guessing 30 to 50, but I didn't get a sense from the number of people that were on the call, but it was a lot.
Interesting.
What I'm not seeing is, I'm not seeing
I
mine.
don't think I finished filling it. I know that you sent us a form to fill out.
Yeah.
I'm halfway through, I never finished it, so did you like to complete it? or-
No, that's it. Shall we come a little bit closer? I think we need to be here because of the mic and the cameras, but you guys can come closer.
I can track.
How close is it?
Yeah, let's do that.
Close.
Thank you.
That's two.
You don't bite, do you?
What?
You don't bite, right?
Bite?
Sometimes.
Depends.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Sorry about the heat, folks. I got in here, I turned it on, but I can only heat it up so much
It's okay,
for
it's
an
okay.
hour of us.
It'll get warm later.
I mean, it's the most Jewish answer of all time.
Especially if we're studying.
Oh, no, it will get warm later. I'll sit here by myself in the dark, you know, this one. Israel is particularly like that. So here it's called Jewish, in Israel it's called being Polish. I swear to God, it's not a joke, really. When somebody says something like this, it's like, can you make it more Polish?
Okay, so we do have to use the microphones.
So far it was all the mic.
Yeah, well, they caught it.
Off the mic.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, and to our second piloting of the new Reform Torah Commentary. I'm Rabbi Paul Kipnis with Rabbi Lana Zlibman Soloway. Let's begin with the blessing. It's the blessing for Torah. It's Baruch Tvitzivanu, and then I'll give you the last three words. So together,
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, God of the universe. It again to remind ourselves, and also, if you remember, towards the end of last session, we were asking some questions that actually the CCR asked us to ask the participants, which are all of us, and this is a very important piece. So today we're gonna sort of go in a gentle dance between the text and the questions, and we'll try really to see what comes out from you after we will read the text. And then if we need, we'll also look at the commentaries, but we'll sort of, we want to centralize the conversation coming from what you're feeling and thinking that will come up from the text. We're actually reading today one of the most beautiful and maybe the most important texts of the Torah. The third chapter of Exodus, when Moses is chosen to be the leader, the story of the burning bush, which is really epic. But first, we'll read the translation, the principles of the translation, and I want to ask you as we read. Good morning. Please join us. As we will read, and we will go around, and each of us will read a paragraph. As we read, just see if things come up for you, because I'm already posing the question that we're going to answer after, which is, what did you find interesting or not about the principles? So maybe if you're holding a pencil, you want to make some marks or circle something in the principles as we go, so it will make it easier, all right? So the question would be, what did you find interesting or notable about the principles? And thank you, Donna, for making our notes. And you can write this question, and then we will see what people have to say. So let's just start, Lisa. We're starting at the bottom part of the first page. This translation.
This translation, 1, will be enriched by the many English translations that have preceded this one, and by the insights of traditional Jewish commentators and contemporary scholarship. It will have scholarly integrity, although its primary audience is not the community of scholars.
It will be created with laity and clergy in mind for their use in worship, group, and personal study and life cycle events.
Will aim to be an English equivalent of the Hebrew text, translating not word for word, but sense for sense, idea for idea. The Hebrew text will be rendered in English in full recognition of the ways in which the two languages differ, in sound, syntax, rhythm, breadth and depth of vocabulary and structure, and in the layered meanings of words and idioms that are unique to the cultures in which the languages have formed.
4, will aim to capture the flavor and texture of biblical Hebrew. At the same time, we strive for a translation that sings when read aloud in English whenever possible, and brings out the beauty of the original. Careful attention will be paid to English style, sound and cadence, diction and register, as well as stylistic features of biblical Hebrew, including semantic and linguistic patterns, poetic qualities such as alliteration, song assonance, consonants, rhythm, rhyme, wordplay, puns, multiple levels of meaning, allusion, euphemism, parallelism, and chiasmus. Did I get it right? Chiasmus?
Chiasmus.
Yes. Creative English style will reflect notable features of the Hebrew. For example, if there is a wordplay or sound patterning in Hebrew, there will often be comparable use of the language in English.
It will aim to be a source of spiritual inspiration, demonstrating the beauty and complexity of the Torah and its value in our lives.
Will aim to make the text come alive for readers and students, which may entail the use of creative or challenging language. We hope that new translations of familiar words and expressions will draw attention to them, promoting reflection on their meaning.
Will aim for clarity in conveying meaning, except in cases where it seems that the Hebrew text is intentionally ambiguous. Sometimes the translation will reflect difficulties or ambiguities in the original without trying to smooth them out and make them invisible.
Before I read chiasmus, it's a literary device. It's ABBA. Prayer is a record of the best and most meaningful moments in our meaningful and best parts of our lives. ABBA. It was in my opening sermon. What number are we on? 8. Will incorporate Hebrew words within the English text. There are several reasons for this. To make clear to readers that the text is composed in another language, to emphasize the value of the Hebrew language, to teach some of the most significant words, to help readers recognize in a new context words that may already be familiar to them, to demonstrate linguistic relationships, wordplay, and leitmotifs, and to give non-Hebrew speakers a sense of the sound and texture
We'll use the gender-accurate as distinct from gender-sensitive methodology developed for the revision of the Platt Bamberger Torah. That is, the translation will use male or female singular pronouns when the text is clearly referring to a man or a woman, but when no specific gender is intended. They, them, their will often be used as default pronouns. Male pronouns of God will not be used, though the translation will convey specifically male theological imagery when it appears in text.
Will reflect inconvenient truths about the biblical period and its literature, such as slavery, sexism, hostile relations with non-Israelites, the pervasiveness of violence, and the anthropomorphic images of God, as well as God's rage and violence toward humanity, without apologetic attempts to clean up or tone down the language.
Will, however, make language choices with sensitivity to the diverse community for which we are translating. For example, a word may be translated as barren or as childless. A phrase might be translated as male and female slaves, or enslaved persons, male and female. A word might be translated as prostitute or promiscuous woman, courtesan, harlot, or sex worker. Oh, I never thought I'd say all that. A word describing two men having sex may be translated as an abomination, repugnant, or an act or taboo. Regarding all these choices and others as well, the translation will be faithful to the Hebrew, but will be presented in a way that is as inclusive and respectful as possible. Sometimes word choice depends on context. For example, there may be distinctions between the narrative voice and the voices of characters in dialogue who do not necessarily use inclusive, respectful language.
We will view Torah with reverence and will also be attuned to comic elements in the text.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so what stood out for you in this principle? What is interesting, notable?
In number 3, where it says idea for idea, that seemed to me problematic, except maybe 7 says it will aim for clarity. The reason to me it's problematic is because it's why we read Torah all the time, because we interpret it different all the time. So how can you have ideas for idea? I mean, that means they're determining what that idea is.
Interesting.
I don't know, going off of that, I think there's a reason why we have clout, which is our original, I think this is really meant, right, to be a commentary, am I correct on that?
It's actually be the plan is
Oh,
for it to
so
be
this is like the
new
Plaut.
standard.
New.
Plaut,
I see.
Gunter Plaut, and I think it's Herbert Bamberger, wrote in the
85.
1985 a commentary. It's a blue cover, and it was called the Plaut Commentary after the first one, and it became the standard in Reform Synagogue. Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know, I think idea for idea is fine, that doesn't bother me. I think it's gonna be interesting to see how they're able to, I'm gonna phrase through this, how they're able to like make those sensitive word language choices, but still keep the overall meaning, and I'm curious to see how they do that.
Yes.
I think number 10 about inconvenient truths. I think it's a very brave and admirable endeavor. It reminds me a little bit of the phrase one step, or well, actually, I guess not one step forward, 2 steps back, but 1 step back, 2 steps forward. Because I think it could make us more vulnerable to being put under a microscope, for our texts to be taken out of context, for others' political gains, and for us to be viewed through a lens that doesn't feel entirely fair and could make us very defensive.
but I think in the long run could really help progress our role and relationships in the world, and our own accountability and knowledge of where we came from and where we're striving to go.
And just a request, we got a request from online viewers and live control. We got a request from online viewers and live control to be using the microphone all the time.
Number 10 is brave and admirable.
Beautiful, thank you. Who else? Something about the principles before we dive in?
I wasn't sure.
It took a lot of thought to put these principles together. They're very powerful, and obviously this is how they had to start before moving forward, but it's a lot. Just this alone is a lot to take in before we even look at the text.
Yeah. Make sure you write that. Anything else that strikes you? Yeah?
Thank you. It shows how, these very thoughtful and detailed explanation of the principles shows how complex translation is from language to language. Biblical translation in particular, but I really appreciate seeing it like this. So, and yeah, should I say where I'm coming to this from?
You may.
Okay. I just finished a role on the translation team for the JPS Tanakh, which came out October 1st. And this is just beautifully and, very, these principles just, I can't wait to see how this develops.
Jewish Publication Society. Sorry. I will add that I love the two things. The use of Hebrew in the English text. It's uncomfortable, it's different, but it is it will create a generation who know that Moshe is Moses, who will know that Avram or Avraham is Abraham or Abram or Abraham. It connects in with that tradition going back, and it raises people up. I also love the literary, the assonance, the use of puns, the language. It's a different type of translation, but it allows us to see the beauty of the Hebrew a little more in the English.
I'll just echo that, really to sort of reinforce the Hebrew sentiment. And the reason, because Hebrew words have meaning. It's not just names. So it's not just that we will know that Moshe is Moses, but we will understand what the meaning of the name Moshe means, because it has one. And we actually have a few powerful examples in the text that we're going to read today. And the second, sort of going back to what Mark said at the very beginning, idea for idea, just to remind ourselves that every translation is also is a commentary. It maybe doesn't intend to do that, but it does. So just something to keep in mind, that every translation is an interpretation at the same time. Yeah.
I'm wondering if they have native Hebrew speakers on their committee, because one of my daughters, where she works, when the company is writing the website in English, they go to her, she lives in Berlin, to make sure that it's something that a native speaker would say. So I'm just curious. It's more than just knowing the language.
Right.
You need the native aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Good question, and we might also ask, more than native in addition to, or even more than native Hebrew speakers, it's people who understand in depth the biblical Hebrew, because biblical Hebrew is very different than modern Hebrew. Connected but.
Just one more thing, and it's kind of tying together the use of the Hebrew. and a different one, which was the use of idioms. And part of this is what we talked about last time, but one maybe suggestion, if I may be so presumptuous, is last time we were talking about the idioms and how in English say it, and it would be wonderful, I think, to raise a generation of readers who has a little bit of agility with those kinds of native phrases.
Beautiful. All right, thank you all. Shall we dive in? So we are in the book of Genesis, the second book of the Chumash, of the 5 books of the Torah. We're in chapter 3. We will read the English all the way through the entire chapter. I invite you to have your pencils, and as Rabbi Paul going to read the English, just to circle words, ideas, questions, thoughts, gut feeling, whatever really comes up. And then once we read the whole chapter all the way from the beginning till the end, we'll start addressing everything that you marked and everything that came up for you as we were reading it.
Chapter 3, Exodus, verse 1. Now Moshe was grazing the flock of his father-in-law Yitro, priest of Midian. He led the flock westward, deep into the wilderness, and came to the mountain of God, Horeb. An emissary of Adonai appeared to him in the flaming heart of fire from within a certain bush. Suddenly he saw the bush was ablaze with fire. The bush was ablaze with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Moshe said to himself, I will turn aside so I may see this amazing sight. Why isn't the bush burnt up in the blaze? Adonai saw that he had turned aside to see, and God called to him from within the bush, Moshe, Moshe. He said, Hineni, I am here. And God said, Come no nearer. Slip your sandals off your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And God said, I am the God of your father, God of Abraham, God of Yitzchak, God of Yaakov. And Moshe hid his face, for he was awestruck, afraid of looking at God. Adonai said, I have seen clearly my people's debasement in Mitzrayim, Egypt, and their anguished outcry caused by their slave drivers. I have heard it. Indeed, I know their pain. So I have come down to deliver them from the hand of Mitzrayim, and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land. A land aflow with milk and honey, a place of the Canaani, the Hitti, the Emori, the Prizi, the Chivi, and the Yevusi. Now then, the outcry of Bnei Yisrael has come to me. I have seen the oppression that Mitzrayim imposes on them. Now come, I will send you to Paro, and you must lead my people Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. Moshe said to God, Who am I that I should go to Paro and lead Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim? God explained, I will be with you, and you have this as a sign that it was myself. God explained, I will be with you, and you will have this as a sign that it was I myself who sent you. When you lead the people out of Mitzrayim, you will serve God at this mountain. But Moshe said to God, Suppose I come to Bnei Yisrael and say to them, Your forebears God sent me to you. And they ask me, What is that one's name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moshe, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I will be what I will be. And God said, This is what you shall say to Bnei Yisrael. Ehyeh sent me to you. God further said to Moshe, You shall say this to Bnei Yisrael. Adonai, the God of your forebears, God of Abraham, God of Yitzchak, and God of Yaakov, sent me to you. This is my name through all time. By this I am called age to age. Go, gather the elders of Israel, and say to them, Adonai, the God of your forebears, appeared to me, God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, saying,
I have turned my attention to you and what is being done to you in Mitzrayim. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the misery of Mitzrayim, to the land of the Canaani, the Hitti, the Amori, the Perizi, the Chivi, and the Yevusi, to a land aflow with milk and honey. They will heed your message, and you will come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Mitzrayim, and say to him, Adonai, God of the Ivriim, surprised us with an encounter. Now then, please let us go 3 days' distance into the wilderness, so we may sacrifice to Adonai our God. I know very well that the king of Mitzrayim will not allow you to go, unless compelled by a forceful hand. So I will stretch forth my hand and strike Mitzrayim with all my marvels, the deeds I will do in its midst. After that, he will set you free. I will grant this people favor in the eyes of Mitzrayim, and this is what will happen. When you go, you will not go empty-handed. For each woman will request of her neighbor and of any woman sojourning in her home objects of silver and objects of gold and clothing, and you will put them on your sons and on your daughters. So you shall deliver ruin, despoiling Mitzrayim. One reminder as we go through the instructions here is we're not studying to understand meaning in the same way. We're studying to understand commentary and translation and commentary.
Beautiful. I suggest we take 60 seconds to breathe what we just heard and to really sort of see what each and every one was marked. And then in a few seconds, whoever feels that they want to get us started, we'll go from there. All right. Sure. Absolutely.
I didn't notice last time, that maybe because I wasn't as familiar with it. Well, I do know the story. I just love how it says Moshe versus Moses. I mean, it was much more poignant for some reason this time. And so I really loved the translation of the names and of the places. That's what I really
You mean
found.
not the translation, that they're
I mean,
using the Hebrew
exactly,
in the
not- yeah, they're using the
English.
actual Hebrew and English.
Right.
I just thought it was really so fascinating, and I've just like last time, I found myself wanting to go to the Plout or go out to another commentary to compare, but it really flowed for me. Everywhere they did that, I really liked it very much, and I loved how they how they put things in parentheses, giving us at that moment the translation.
Beautiful. So because I want to help the CCR committee, Donna, please write in the notes the question. We're going to navigate the questions in between the conversation. And one of the questions that I don't think we really addressed last time, so we'll start with that, is how did the use of the Hebrew translation affect your flow of reading and understanding? Was it helpful, or was it destructive, or something else? So Donna, since you're starting this with that, you can write a question and then write what you said. Did the use of the Hebrew transliteration help you to appreciate or feel closer to the biblical Hebrew and to the Torah itself? And then don't forget to write what you said.
You should give her a second.
Yeah.
I want to get the question first.
Shall I say it again? Okay. Did the use of the Hebrew transliteration help you appreciate or feel closer to the biblical Hebrew and to the Torah itself? So let's just spend a minute on this question and then we'll continue with your other thoughts, if that's okay.
Yeah, this just shows that sometimes I should hold thoughts until reading, because this is exactly what I was thinking, and I think it's amazing, especially the two examples of Hineni and Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. Having that together, it's just so powerful. I really love it. I really love it. Okay, and I'll stop. I have one more, but.
Okay. What else about the use of Hebrew?
Wait, I brought out another microphone.
Oh, beautiful.
Well, I have a number of comments, but I'll space it out until later. One Hebrew in particular, one word, Pharaoh. Now, if you change, we've all grown up with a specific way of saying that. A lot of songs that the kids sing are going to have to be changed. I'm just wondering about, Pharaoh is such a important person that I wonder if changing his name is a good idea.
Okay, thank you. More about the Hebrew.
Yep, more about the Hebrew. I want to amplify that. It also, all the different transliterations of the place names and all, to me, I look at that as what are we going to do with our songs and our liturgy and all the places that have variant spellings? So it creates kind of a technical question.
Thank you.
Moshe ending with an H just irks me. I know that that's proper, but it's frustrating in my head.
What is?
Moshe ending with an H in the transliteration. Like, I've never seen that. I know why they're doing it. But anyways, I'm curious about, like, if I were here with, like, a small group with no rabbi trying to use this, right? Like, just like a group of people who aren't as familiar. And all these, locations are in Hebrew, I think that's difficult. Or if I'm studying on my own. The other thing that I'm curious about is, like, we're in chapter 3, right? So obviously this isn't the first time Moses is mentioned, but in this chapter, we don't have any of those brackets, like saying that Moshe is Moses, right? So we know as a group, probably all of us, but if I wasn't as familiar, would I know that? And know to look back to the first time Moses is mentioned, to see what that name is, or Abram and Yitzhak and Yaakov, wherever they are, I know that they're here. Yeah, in verse 6, like, they haven't been, you know what I'm saying? Like, are they going to put footnotes in with, like, what the names are in English? And I'm just really not sure about these locations. It's a lot of locations. Like Mitzrayim I get, but all the other ones I'm not sure that I'm a huge fan of being in Hebrew.
So thank you, and you're bringing us sort of a bigger picture type of a comment, right? So are we reading and learning the Torah sort of as a whole, and then we have whatever came first in mind, or is it meant to be that maybe like a chapter in a regular book that somebody can open up just at Exodus chapter 3 and to read through and to understand whatever's there without having any context before or after, right? And then do we have a map that is attached to see the places. Question mark.
It almost feels to me like a conservative version versus a reform version. It's meatier. I'm not necessarily complaining, but as Lisa said, is it as accessible for, just a group getting to read through it or what have you without either the commentary or a rabbi to lead a discussion? And then the phraseology in 3 and 4, turned aside, I think that's in our current version, but that seems so casual for such a big moment. Is that an actual translation of the Hebrew? I don't know. No.
3 and 4.
I would also add that I remember when Plout came out, and I remember when the Ashkenazi Weiss commentary, known by others as the Torah Women's Commentary, came out. And even when the conservative Eitz Chaim came out. It was, each of them were shocking to the people who knew Judaism was this, who knew Torah was this, who understood this is the way you read it. When Mishkan Tefillah, our prayer book, came out, it was shocking. They're writing not for what was, but saying what should be. We have a generation of young people and a generation of adults who just don't know these names, these places, can't make meaning out of the connection between Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, and Ehyeh and Adonai, Yud He Vav He. And I wonder if this pedagogical piece is there. It will shake us, but I'm less, I am concerned about the changes in what it'll do to songs today, but there will be new songs, and it'll go in new directions.
To give another side, I absolutely loved those changes. Like, for instance, Paro, to me, it deflated this Western cartoonish villain, and it's just like how we say the Bible instead of Torah as just like our shorthand, and we say, God and Pharaoh, and I think a lot of times we get kind of duped into thinking of Judaism as a Western religion, and it's not. And I love this feeling that we're kind of drawn back into our roots, that we are an Eastern religion, and that this isn't, the bearded man God. This isn't the cartoonish villain of Pharaoh. Like, this was a person who was ruling for his people, and thought a certain way that we have become accustomed to. But I loved it, and I thought using the brackets for definitions for English terms was great. I think that maybe the commentary could make connections, at least in early versions, like some of us may be used to calling this person by this name, but I personally wouldn't like to see the Western names put back in parentheses or brackets. I really like this idea that it's, and about the reform versus conservative, I mean, my view is that, reform, conservative, orthodox, it's not like light, medium, strong. It's different ideologies. But it's all equally serious and deliberate. And, I think that Reform Judaism actually deserves that respect of a really sobering and strong and loyal text, but that weaves in how we see the world.
Beautiful. Go ahead.
So I found the Hebrew within the English translation to be useful and to put it in a better context for a non-Hebrew speaker, or from that perspective. And The other thing I would say is that on line 14, Yehier, Asher, Yehier, with the English underneath it, I will be what I will be. And then with the following, a couple lines down, Yehier sent me to you. So it brings together the transliteration of the Hebrew, then followed by the English right below it, with Yehieh a few lines down to show the connection. The last line on 14.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bobby.
I'm concerned on number 8, but page 5, at the very top. We have to be able to read the English, too, and it has to go smoothly. I appreciate the list of names, Canaanite and Hittite, and, but English speakers, when there's too many vowels in a row, or here the apostrophes, we have trouble going smoothly over that. So I would hope that the committee would make sure that the English went smoothly. And I noticed that Rabbi Paul on number 12 had to go through it a couple times because as somebody who is used to cold readings, it's not a cold reading, but you can see where you have the it and the I and myself. It's the English has to flow too, and we have to be respectful of English speaking patterns as well.
Beautiful. I also want to address the Hebrew and to give you just a couple of examples. First of all, if we'll take into consideration that most likely we will read it or other people read it with context in mind. So Moshe, why is it Moshe and not Moses? Moshe is someone who mashu oto mehamayim. He was taken from the water. The context that we have in mind is that Moshe was born in Egypt and he was put into the Nile because Jewish women were not supposed to have babies. And the daughter of Pharaoh took him out of the water, and that is the meaning of his name. So when we have that in mind, suddenly it makes sense that it's Moshe and not Moses, because Moses is not a meaning. It's sort of a translation that sounds alike Moshe. But Moshe has like a whole history in his name. And it's true for all the names, and I'm talking now about the names of the people. But I want to actually give you an example from this text. Look at page 3 at the bottom, verse 8. It doesn't use in this text Egypt, well, just sort of aside, next to Mitzrayim. And in the word Mitzrayim, there's the Hebrew word tsar, which means narrow. So when we use the Hebrew, we can envision this very, very narrow place, not necessarily narrow physically, but narrow in terms of, again, the historical context of what is happening to our people in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, being enslaved and being in a very, very narrow space. And then if you go all the way to the bottom of verse 8, it says, bring them up from the land to a good and spacious land. If you look to the right at the Hebrew, now that we can have the Hebrew and the English on the same page, go all the way to the bottom of the Hebrew, and it says, El Eretz Tova Verechava. Rachav, the literal translation in Hebrew, is wide. So when you have something narrow, then the opposite of that is something wide. But the English doesn't say wide, it says spacious, which is like a whole world of new understanding, right? If we're imagining our people being surrounded in slavery into this place that is sort of narrowing down on them, then God is now saying, I will take him to a place which will be wide, or in this context, spacious, that they will be able to be who they want to be and act accordingly. I found this fascinating that this is the use of this word, the spacious versus the wide, and the context of Mitzrayim as a narrow place.
Can I
Yeah,
jump on that?
sure.
First of all, great learning. That there
No,
we go.
I don't think so. It's
That
in
was
everybody.
a great learning. I missed it both in the English and in the Hebrew, and probably in all my education prior to then. Thank you for illuminating that. And now it raises a question of the use of Mitzrayim. I like it, but I don't get there the tsar, so the narrow. So I have to know, and then I can play off of the English. I don't know how one would do it if there needs to be a star or something in the commentary that says Mitzrayim is narrow place as opposed to spacious, and maybe they do in the commentary and I didn't notice it. But they didn't comment on it in the commentary. Fabulous. Thank you.
Just a couple of other examples. And again, we are reading this chapter as a standalone, and we don't know, like, in terms of the translation, what priors that. So if the first time that the word Mitzrayim appears, it's there, and it's explained somehow, that it's a whole different story, right? Same for Moshe, same for Abraham, same for everybody. Just a couple of other examples. We talked about the Pharaoh. You brought it up, right? So Pharaoh in Hebrew is Paro. There are 4 letters to his name: Pei, Resh, Ain, Hey. In the middle, we have Resh and Ain, which together make the word Ra, which means bad, or maybe even to a certain extent evil. So it's not like we're just talking about a king, Pharaoh or whatever, anybody else. We're talking about a really mean king to our people. By the way, side note, all the kings in Egypt used to be called pharaohs, and they actually used to have numbers. And of course, again, to put it in context, it's not like all of them were evil to our people. But yet we believe that our slavery lasted for 400 years, so there was a number of them, right? But it completely changes the understanding if you know that, right? Because Pharaoh is a name, but Paro is like a very specific understanding. And then 2 other examples I wanted to share. First of all, if you go up to verse number 2, on the 3rd page, it says, an emissary of Adonai appeared to him in a flaming heart of fire from within a certain bush. Go to the Hebrew. Couple of things, actually. So first of all, the Hebrew starts, verse 2, Vayar malach Adonai. Malach, their literal meaning is an angel. And the English translated differently, which is actually beautiful. It's not an angel that, again, sort of it's going, Malka, I stick with your comment from before about the cartoon, right? So it's not like we're imagining an angel with, white wings or whatever. But the angel of God, we have a lot of these, that the angel of God comes and says something to someone, but it truly is a messenger or an emissary, which is a much more sort of elevated and a beautiful word to use for that. So that was the one thing. And the other thing, it says, Vayar malach Adonai elav belavat esh mitoch ha-sneh. Sneh is the bush. And here, I actually want to say something good about the translation, because nobody uses the word sneh in Hebrew today. So if I'm just a Hebrew speaker with no context or prior knowledge, and I'm reading this, I have no idea what it means. Like if I'm a high school kid and I'm studying Tanakh in school, which every Israeli kid mandatory needs to do, I have no understanding of what the word sneh means, because it's not a word that we use in regular Hebrew of today. And here it's very, very clear. And I want us to look for a minute at the commentary number 2, but let's just read the verse first again. So the Hebrew says, ויער מלאך אדוני אליו בלבת אש מתוך הסנה. ויער והנה הסנה בוער באש והסנה איננו אוכל. And the English says, an emissary of Adonai appeared to him in a flaming heart of fire. This is what we're going to talk about. Flaming heart of fire from within a certain bush. Suddenly he saw the bush was ablaze with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Go back for just a minute to the Hebrew, belabat esh. You see this word? If no, can a neighbor point out to you? So we will just look at the letters for a minute. Labat esh 2. Yeah, do we have it? The Hebrew, just the word? So lava is the fire that goes out from when a volcanic mountain is exploding. So the what comes out, that's lava, right? But inside of that, there's the word lev, which means heart. And now look how it's translated, and let's read the commentary on page 8, number 2. A flaming heart of fire. Heart of fire. Like, what is that? Heart of fire. And it says the noun laba may be derived either from lev, which means heart, or from lava, which means flame. Rashi, a commentary from the 11th century, explains the phrase belabat esh as libo shel esh. Just, I'll say again the Hebrew, it's just absolutely beautiful. Labat esh libo shel esh. You hear how it's the same words, only like it's just gently pronounced differently. Libo shel esh means the heart of the fire. So the people that put this translation in this specific verse, they went and they read Rashi as they were thinking how to put the English over here. The present translation reflects these mixed linguistics origins and the Hebrew-speaking listeners' automatic association of laba with heart as well as flame. Isn't that beautiful?
I
I
think
said enough. Go ahead.
it's what you pointed out is not only is it a beautiful metaphor, but that the translators are using, they're citing Rashi, and their commentaries in the back are going all the way from the early medieval commentators on up to this year. I mean, they're using so many different scholars. It's impressive and wonderful to have this for us.
Beautiful. I want to take us one step forward and pose another question. So this is a kind of a famous story, right? I mean, the story we looked at last time, it is known for people, but it's also kind of a story that we sort of want to put it sort of somewhere in the back because we're so maybe embarrassed, or it has a lot of feelings attached to that, okay? But this story is kind of a famous story, and it's really about making of a leader, which was Moshe, the relationship that he had with the Holy One. We believe that Moshe is probably the only one in the whole Torah and beyond that had such a close relationship with the Holy One. And of course, the promise about the land and everything that comes out of it. So if you learned this story before, okay? If you learned this chapter before in your lives, how does this translation changes your understanding or perspective of this particular text? And Donna, I would like you to write that question, because this is also actually one of the questions that we were asked and we didn't get to last time. So,
How does the story change your
if you
perspective?
have studied this chapter before, did this new translation help you to see it differently or provide new insights? And if so, then please share with us how. So, go ahead, Valka.
I think I'm going to have a second one, but I need to think about it more. But just so the very superficial one is, I think it's fascinating that we always talk about this as the burning bush when it never burned.
Right.
So it would be nice to maybe change that turn of phrase. And now I'm going to keep thinking about the other thing.
Oh, that was just a wave. But I will speak anyways. I have to be honest, I don't remember the last time I studied this with a different translation. But I don't know. I disagree with you, Mark. I have to be honest. I think this feels very reform, in my opinion. Like, the wording is, I think, reform. Like, it feels very clear to me. Like, it's easier to understand than what I've used in the past. I think it reflects the reform movement's values, and I really like it. I like the Hebrew being used. I do. I don't know that all the locations are as relevant as the names, depending on the locations. Like, I think Mitzrayim is important. I don't know about all the others that are only mentioned like once. But I could see myself using this and also teaching with it in a way that's accessible. Yeah.
Beautiful. You have a mic there, Bobby. Just,
I just wanted to.
yeah, just do it with a mic.
So, I'm not quite sure how this phrase answers your specific question, but it might. On number 13, Moshe says to God, suppose I come to Bnei Israel and say to them, suppose. So what do you think? Let's discuss this. He's talking to God, and suppose is let's kick this around and see what we come up with. That's interesting. I mean, that's maybe others might want to jump in on that, but I just thought that. Well, he's putting himself not so much on an equal footing, but he's not lowering himself. God wants something from, well, here I am interpreting, so you don't want me to do that, but that is kind of a loaded word. That's a specific choice.
So beautiful, and thank you so much for bringing it up. I did not see that, or I did not notice that when I read. So context-wise, every single leader in the Torah and in the Tanakh, later on in the prophets and so on, that is chosen by God, we know that, well, maybe not all of us know, I'm using my clergy hat to share that there was always a question there for each leader that was chosen that said, who, me, why, right? And there was a conversation there with God. So this is actually part of it. But more interestingly is look at the Hebrew. Again, since we have it one mirror the other, the word suppose or nothing like that appears in the Hebrew. And that goes back to what Mark actually shared from the very beginning when we read the principles about the idea versus idea and not word for word. The Hebrew says, V'yomer Moshe el Elohim, Moshe said to God, Hine anochi ba el bnei Israel, ve'amarti lahem, here I am going to the people of Israel and telling them, God of our ancestors sent me. So the word suppose not even remotely there. Go ahead. No, so what it says here is that it is, I think, I need to think about actually more, but I think it's clear from the Hebrew sort of context that they are having a conversation, and Moshe is coming with the doubt of, okay, so suppose, right, like he's thinking, I will come to them and will tell them, but why would they believe me, right? Sort of, this is the wider context. But the words, the actual words that are used in the Hebrew and the translation are different.
So I actually found it fascinating when I read it before, but I saw the Hebrew and the English differently. Not being a native Hebrew speaker.
Like something that kind of incorporates the narrowness. First, First, I didn't really like the idea. I was thinking about it, but I didn't like the idea of just like adding words. But listening to Rabbi Paul and that piece of commentary and the idea for idea and thinking like, well, I mean, it could be a way that we decide to define and translate Mitzrayim in a loyal way still.
Perhaps the narrow hand, either the constricted or the narrow hand of Mitzrayim. Perhaps the constricted or the narrow hand as opposed to spacious land.
There's another thing. If you look at verse 7 and verse 8, it's actually fascinating. So we have Mitzrayim appears twice, right? So the first we have in verse 7, I have seen clearly my people's debasement in Mitzrayim, and then it says in English, Egypt. But then in verse 8, it says, so I have come down to deliver them from the hand of Mitzrayim. Nothing changed in the Hebrew. But here in English, they say the Egyptians, which to me is actually 100% commentary of the, it's a very conscious choice to say here in brackets Egyptians and not Egypt, because in the Hebrew nothing changed. If I look in the Hebrew, it says Mitzrayim both times, spelled the same, the vowels are the same, the nikud is the same. It doesn't say Miyad Mitzrim, which will mean Egyptians, like the people, versus Mitzrayim as a whole context and everything that's in it.
So they're saying it means people.
No, the English says the Egyptians, the people, versus just Mitzrayim, Egypt, and everything in it.
Again, all reading of Hebrew is an interpretation. The words sometimes mean a person, sometimes Yisrael is sometimes the guy named, what's his name? Jacob. Sometimes it's a place, and sometimes it's the people.
Right, but they made a point in the English to, exactly. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just realized it was going to go into kind of commentary. But I just want to say the hand of, and whether it is Egypt or Egyptians, and I actually think I prefer Egypt. I think for the first time I've seen here, I've thought of the parallel for when God does, when we do have the Exodus that, like we study during the Seder, God's hand. Mm-hmm. And so compared with Egypt's hand, I like that.
Yeah, Beth, go ahead.
That's really interesting. I wonder if that's why they kept that part of the metaphor for the parallel. I wouldn't be surprised if that factored into their decision.
Okay.
That they kept Biyad Mitzrayim as the metaphor. They kept that metaphor where you could have just said, from the narrow places and avoided the whole hand of, if you're translating from one language to the other.
Okay.
To me, the word means both the land and the people. It's like if you go to a foreign country, if there's anyone left that says, "Oh, you're from America? I love America." Well, does that mean the land or does that mean the people in the land? So it could mean either, you know. I find actually this whole thing, it's kind of, when I said it feels more conservative, bless you, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. It's, you know, it's, again, I think it's just meatier. And so to answer your question, I think you can get a lot out of this. It's different than what we were used to.
What makes it meatier?
It's more challenging. It's got more of the Hebrew and more of the and to me it's a little harder to read, which is fine because it makes it more challenging for me. And that's not a bad thing. It just means you're not skimming it. You have to go a little deeper into it to get what its messages are. So because the Hebrew and also because of sometimes the way the sentences are structured, like the turn aside or whatever it is, just unusual phraseology that we don't use that kind of elevates it.
Thank you. We are in our last minutes, so sure.
Because I circled Flaming Heart of Fire as well. I just think, I just love how it's more, to me, this is just more visual than the other commentaries that I've read.
Thank you. Yeah,
I
Ilan.
just wanted to comment that I would not have seen what you mentioned in line 2 and how the wordplay happens without your introducing it or having the time to look into the commentaries, one of the two. So either a leader of the study group to help understand the wordplay or if you're studying the commentary. But otherwise, I found the translation to be quite readable and I understood and I thought it was quite good as long as the commentary is there and as long as I am willing to take the time to read it.
Beautiful. Other closing thoughts?
I personally think this is much clearer than what I've used, but I think there are certain things that need to be like thought about still, because when I look at verse 4, like, you know, God called to him from within the bush, Moshe, Moshe, he said, Hineni. Like, do we know that he's replying there? It could still be God talking, you know? So I think there are certain things that need to be cleared up, but in my opinion, this is much, much easier to study with, even given the Hebrew, which I like for the most part.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You know, there's something to be said for having a bunch of new words, a bunch of new phrases. It kind of wakes you up. You can't just sit there and go, yeah, I know this. So, you know, waiting for the next whatever. Okay, let's discuss, blah, 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 blah. Because they're like, you know, little markers that you have to stop because you're realizing, wait, there's something different here. And so your brain kind of wakes up a little bit. I think there's something to be said for that because, you know, I've been in a lot of Torah study sessions, but you can glaze over a little bit and let the rabbi do the work of just saying everything, you know, and this, you have to jump into it.
Beautiful. So first of all, thank you all. Again, you can take this home and read the commentaries, and I will send you the form that they ask us to fill out. Try to do it within the next 3 days. I know it's not always possible. I can't help it. So I want to send you with a question. And it's not connected to this particular translation, but just because it's here. And that's what Lisa brought up, is the word hineni, which is such a powerful word. And often it's translated as here I am. Here they wrote it as I am here. But it's a word that appears several times in the Torah. Every single time it's on the point of a calling, of choosing someone to be. And I want to send you home with a question of what is the true essence and the true meaning of hineni, whether you translate it as here I am or I am here. What is your calling? What is your response if you hear or feel a calling? Personally, this is a word that I don't want to say struggle, but I find myself questioning pretty much for my entire life. What does that mean? Hineni. So just something to go and think about and maybe see where else it appears in the Torah, who are the people involved in that. But mainly, truly, just to feel, to ask yourself, what does that mean to say hineni when God is speaking to us? What is there? And then completely off the mic and off the notes, but just for a lot of you are in my course about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I just cannot help it. If you look to page 5, all the way at the top, remember how we talked about the land of Israel never being empty? The promised land that was never really empty. So verse 8 says, I will take you to that spacious land, the land flow with milk and honey, the place of the Knaani and the Hitti and the Amori and the Prizi and the Hivi and the Yevusi. Every single one of these foreign names are names of foreign nations that were dwelling in the land of Israel that the Holy One promised Abraham and all of his ancestors, which are